If someone we don't know asks us at a party, "Who are you?" A usual way of answering this would be to give our name, knowing that this was what was being asked for. However, once a student asked Suzuki Roshi after a Dharma talk, "Who are you?" And he laughed and said, "You ask me who I am when I'm trying to forget myself." When Bodhidharma told the southern Chinese emperor that he received no merit for his abundant contributions to Buddhism, the emperor asked, "Who are you?" And Bodhidharma replied, "I don't know," and then left the next night before the emperor, and left that night so the emperor couldn't respond in an unnecessary way. Nevertheless, even though we learn as beginners in Zen that one of Buddhism's main principles is that everything is always changing, we may not want to think of this as applying to us. We may not think this is applying to us, especially when things are going well. Changes instead can frighten us, as we don't like losing what we have, being in good health, or the things that we own, or people who we are close to. Nevertheless, as nothing stops changing, no one can be said to have a self. As the Dalai Lama pointed out, this is because the self that we think of as ourselves cannot be said to be permanent because we don't live forever. Shakyamuni termed this lack of self anatma, or no self, in reference to this self who we think that we are. Our still believing, despite this, that we always remain the same may be due to our taking as proof of this the influence on us of a composite of remembered images of ourselves taken from moments at different times. We can even think of this self as something to be proud of, though, pardon me, it is the source of most, if not all, of our things troubling us. Our only practice can help us to realize that the thoughts, feelings, and emotions that we may consider to define us are in fact what cause us to suffer. Dogen Zenji said in the Genjo Koan, "To study Buddhism is to study the self." Through doing Zazen, we become aware of how much we are affected by our self-serving desires and dislikes. This recognition does not happen through using our intelligence to seek things out, but through practice bringing them to our attention. Previously, we hadn't seen what had been taking place beyond the scenes within our ordinary life, and so we're unaware of how delusions affected us. The teaching that we therefore find ourselves paying attention to at that part in our practice is the second of the Bodhisattva vows. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Coming to terms with our problematic thoughts and feelings in this way is part of a form of purification that takes place in us as we continue to sit. What Dogen Zenji expresses in the subsequent to study the self is to forget the self simply means that we find that we have stopped caring about whether or not our desires are satisfied, as it has become okay not to get what we want or to get what we don't want. This could be negative sounding in implying that we have to give up things of value to us, although in fact we don't actually, but it is a great relief to feel this way. What this shows is that our practice is taking good care of us, whether or not we are aware of it. The result of having forgotten ourselves doesn't mean that we have truly become non-attached. For while we are freer, we still have desires with respect to our world. Therefore, Dogen next says that to forget the self is to be identified by all things. That is, when we have practiced for a long time and care little about doing things for ourselves, and shift our caring to doing things for others, who we are then is determined by what those in our individual world require from us. However, in desiring to help others, they are serving to define us, and we continue to have a sense of self, albeit an externalized one. New Zen teachers, for instance, will worry more about their students than about themselves. Thus, while such teachers are not attached to what they get for themselves, they identify as being teachers. Their identifying as being teachers makes them attached to what is happening to those in their world. Dogen Zenji answers this with, to be identified by all things is to cast off the body and mind of self and the body and mind of others. This signals the end of a sense of self, not only in us, but also a sense of self we get from caring for those in our world. Now both we and our world, or those in our world, are without the cluster of thoughts concerned with self. And as a result, we recognize others as having Buddha nature. This being so, we are left with no reason to help them. But that doesn't mean that we don't do that. Rather, helping out others isn't something now that we have to think about, because doing it just comes naturally to us. It is certainly not a matter of us watching their back while they are watching ours, which would instead be a deal thought up to aid both parties, ourselves and others. Reciprocal helping of each other happens because doing it is who we are. Dogen ends with no trace of enlightenment remains, and this no trace continues forever. When we and everyone and thing are empty, there is nothing special about it, simply because that is all there is. For example, if fish could use words, most would find nothing to say about the water they live in, having nothing to compare itself. There is only water. Compare the water to, because there's only water. Indeed, the thinking that makes something special to us finally has nothing to do with who we are. It follows that in thinking of enlightenment as a special experience that we have had, we remain bound to this idea. We are said to be tied by a golden chain. In what we said today already after sitting in the great robe of liberation, far beyond form and emptiness, great robe of liberation, field, I missed that part, field, far beyond form and emptiness. When we, of course, we're putting on our cases or our rakshas after morning zazen. In this field far beyond form and emptiness, the going beyond form is what has occurred earlier in our practice, in its having served to free us from most delusions. And the going beyond emptiness next leaves us free from all attachments. To become unencumbered like this, both the self and Buddhism get forgotten. That's why we say no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue in the Heart Sutra that we'll say in a few minutes. This state of neither emptiness nor form is expressed as not one, not two. Of course, emptiness being the one and form the two. We aren't either of these, but have been released from discrimination. This no trace of enlightenment continues forever means that we are left aware that we, like everyone and everything else, has always been and will always be free to be our true self. Okay, thank you. And here is Jane. So do you have any comments or questions in our last talk, in the last meeting that we have during the year? I'll wait for 12 minutes in case, just in case something comes up. You can spend the time thinking, sitting or seeing if you have a question. Yes, Mark.
This golden chain, I suppose it has a lock on it. And I suppose it's heavy. And so by conceiving of this golden chain, how do we release ourselves from it?
By giving up emptiness.
How can you give up what isn't there?
That's a good question. Because it's always there and always not there.
Thank you.
Yes, Mike.
In continuation of what Mark was asking, are we trying to give up the desire to have answers for everything? You know, like he says, the gold chain stuff and the lock, stuff like that, the self and the non-self and stuff. We want to put ourselves in a situation where we don't indulge in questioning either side, because that's, you know, it's not real, and I don't like that word, but it's the only word I can think of at the moment. But we don't spend our time discerning and discriminating and judging and all this. We just live. Is that kind of a continuation of what Mark was asking?
Sure. But more than make a reasonable choice, because choice, of course, is based on thought. It just is what occurs. All that you hear in a Dharma talk, whether it's a good one or a bad one, is someone trying to explain something to make you continue to practice. And to look at yourself, of course. Because practice is only about you. It's not even about Buddhism, finally. And so everything that you are attached to is something that is going to cause you pain. That doesn't mean that you have to give up things, but it means you have to not care about getting or not getting things. And beyond that too, including enlightenment. Because in fact, actually, some people have an enlightenment experience and some people don't have enlightenment experience, and it doesn't seem to matter in the least. You know, we would like to get enlightened, and you practice long for a while, then it's my battery is almost. Mark, could you get my plug from the other room? I have only a few seconds left. I don't know, it's a few seconds or not, but it's got to be close. That would be the way to get rid of my having to ask me questions. Yeah, the end of the year would be there. What? Well, the end of the year it's 15 days away, but nonetheless, he's going to bring the cord in, so we won't be shut off here. But because of that, low battery came up. I forgot what I was talking about here. But thank you, Mike. Anyway, yes, and road with a tree in it. Otherwise called Mitch.
Oh, I flipped the wrong button. So how do we practice non-attachment during our Zazen?
Well, that's what we're always doing, actually, isn't it? Because
I want to hear you talk about it.
Okay, sure. Well, I mean, in Zazen, we watch our breaths, or we let our breathing just take place ultimately. But even so, you know, when we first sit down, you know, thoughts are there, and probably quite often for the whole period of Zazen, and we don't attach to those thoughts. But in fact, that's the main practice, not attaching to thoughts. And we're doing that in Zazen. And it helps us, among other things, to form the habit of not doing that. And so that's the most important thing. The same thoughts that are running through your mind during Zazen are the things that are going to, you know, occasionally or more than occasionally cause you to have some difficulty in life. Maybe minor, but anyway, you know, we doubt and we're anxious and we have problems.
But what about you and I have talked in the past about form and talked about in the level of the skandhas, talking about form, then perception, sensation, mental formation, and consciousness. So
yes.
how does that non-attachment lead us? You said we need to go from form to consciousness. How do you practice that? Is that part of the non-attachment we practice in Zazen? Because the eyes, the ears, the nose, even when we're walking around or talking to somebody or in the supermarket or eating that we do every day.
Yeah, of course.
How does that non-attachment in Zazen relate to that kind of mindfulness?
You know, I missed somehow. Let me turn my sound up here, if I can. I missed the last part of what you said. I heard it, but I was a little low for my hearing. So, I mean, I can answer the first part of the question, but I'm not quite.
How does that relate to
ordinary life?
Well, the non-attachment during Zazen, going from form to consciousness in our everyday life, in our mindfulness, in our eating and being in the market or talking to a friend, how does that whole succession?
Well, you know,
because we're practicing this.
Yeah. Okay.
You're talking about practicing non-attachment through thought. I'm talking about practicing non-attachment through my perceptual systems.
That's right. And well, when we talk about the five skandhas, that's of course what was an analogy that I suppose Shakyamuni came up with. I believe that's the case. In meditation, and when we're not paying attention to our thoughts, we're letting them be there. We're just not attaching to them, right? And so this then transform to your ordinary life. Of course, I'll get to the skandhas in a second, but of course we're going to be thinking all the time, and acting on the thinking. We have to, of course. That's who we are. We can't. That will never change. What it changes is our attachment. And by attachment, I mean, well, in a simple sense, not being bothered by whether what you want or don't want is satisfied. If we just accept what is there, and we don't try to force it to give us something what we want, what's there, or if it doesn't, what's there is not what we want. Either way, it's there. We face that. Whatever is there, we that's where we are, but we face that. But at the same time that we're doing it, now I'll come back to the five skandhas here. In the five skandhas, there are five. All of you have heard this many times before. But the first one is, as Mitch brought up, is the sensation. Well, an object hits our senses. Combined, that's called the first skandha. And the last skandha is, right now I'm talking with the last skandha. It's my consciousness. But in between that, in our ordinary life, we naturally sense something. And then we have the perception of it. First, what is that? And then at that moment, without trying to do it at all, we, as animals, let's say, we judge whether we want it or don't want it. And then we elaborate on that. And then we think about it in different ways, and we also think about it with respect to things that we thought about in the past. We connect it with our memory and things like that,
and our experience.
And then it gets a consciousness. But what happens is now what we sense is not what we get, not directly. We get something, but we get something that's now been attached to by many other things. Okay. So in Zazen, sometimes we, like as Suzuki Roshi would have said, when we hear a bird sing, the bird is singing in our head. That's an analogy for that. We don't say to us, he said it prior to that. Sometimes there are Tassajara, there were blue jays who are very noisy at times. But if we think to ourselves, oh, that's a blue jay, they sound terrible. I wish it would shut up, it's bothering my zazen. If we think that, we are discriminating completely. If we're not thinking that, if we're just totally not attaching to anything, then what we sense and what we get, what we receive, what's in our consciousness, end up being the same. So self and other being outside of ourselves, and ourself, they are directly connected. But it's a discrimination, which of course is how we form attachment. That's the problem. We accept all of our skandhas, but we don't get carried away by them. And in Zazen, ultimately, they say, that the only thing that doesn't change is the moment. Yes, he's exactly right, and the moment is very short, but that's fixed. That Dogen calls that's fixed, and it in itself quickly has its own past and present, but everything else is always changing. It's always changing. And so therefore, we when we sit, we can experience in our zazen when when our world and our self is the same. And our world, which is each, once again in the Heart Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, each of the members of the assembly that Buddha is talking to, each is sitting on their own lotus, representing that we all have Buddha nature. And so I've lost my thought here a bit.
So I could practice not attachment as much with form as I can with just an internal mental. I mean,
Yes, you can.
I don't have to have external stimulation for some thought, but I can have external simulation from something coming in from my perceptions. Somebody
Yes.
closes the door. I see Harvey walk through the Zendo, right?
Yeah.
So I could practice that not attachment that
Yeah, well,
way
I
as
know.
much as internally.
Yeah, and so we really we had the perception that everything is okay. I mean, enlightenment or enlightenment experience, of course, is really played up by the Rinzai school. And in our case, we don't. What we play up is being in the moment for us. For us, enlightenment is being in the moment. And that's what I was trying to bring out and then lost track of myself, is that when that happens, that the outside and the inside are the same, and we are all sitting in our own lotus, we are all sitting in the absolute, which of course is also Buddha nature. But in the moment like that, form and emptiness become one. And that's when we can experience that.
Okay,
And
thank you.
but that's the experience of the skandhas only being the first and the fifth.
So we're not going to meet for the rest of the year?
Good
Not gonna
question.
what?
No, we aren't. No, we aren't.
No, I didn't, because I didn't see that.
Yeah.
This is it.
No, I was planning to say that. Yeah, like usual. I mean that we've always had the last 2 weeks. Last actually the next weekend. Well, not the next weekend because next Sunday is still 24th. But anyway, so the week. So usually the middle of December is when we've always stopped. And then we continue again the next year. Now the next Monday is the first. One second, Chris. And Tuesday is the second. But that's so close. It's like having the first and second are kind of like both New Year's days. And so the next time we'll meet, those who do come to the evening, and actually they're probably a Wednesday morning also. I don't see John here today, but he'll be doing his morning zazen at 6:30 on Monday and Wednesday. But in this case, it'll start Wednesday morning, and then for us it'll start Thursday night, and then Friday. But however, we'll be having a zazenkai on the first Saturday, and so therefore there will be no Friday nights. So the first time even though we'll be meeting Wednesday in the morning, Thursday in the evening, the next thing will be the zazenkai. Chris, you want to add to that?
That's the 6th.
That's the 6th, yeah.
No, so I was raising my hand because I was hoping to get one more question about your talk in before we move to.
Sure, of course, yeah.
Basically, okay, cool. Actually, do you want to ask your question first? All right.
Yes, I just have a question about the opening, kind of what you said. If I can find that somewhere, or if you wrote that, and
Oh yeah. Wait, are you talking about like the rope chant?
no, the what you open with the question of who I am, and I'm trying to forget myself, and then did you write that, or is that an excerpt from somewhere?
No. I mean, I summarized it. Yes, and of course there are different places. The one on Suzuki Roshi is in his talks. The one on Bodhidharma is there's a history of Bodhidharma, and that's in there. I guess that's who I mentioned.
I can also
Yeah.
get a
So
transcript.
yeah. Chris can answer that for sure. When he can talk to you later and talk to you about it. But yeah,
Great, thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah,
So
but-
my
well,
question was,
let me add one thing there anyway. First, for the end, is that when we recognize that everything is changing, which is fine, because that everything changes means we can change our own life. We don't have to live the way we are right now. We can change that. We can start to practice and let practice work on us. And over time, it will change us very drastically. Okay. But the main thing about Soto Zen is we say we don't know. And the reason we don't know is because until the moment occurs, let's say you've asked me a question, okay? And at that moment, then the talk of I don't know came up. And then I respond to that. That's all. It's very, very natural. And so therefore, the more you practice, you don't know who you are. But that's a good thing. Because in fact, you're more real. You're more of an ordinary human being that you've ever been because of your troubles. For most people, always are getting in the way, so you really can't see who you really are. And so therefore, when you come to each situation with an open mind, then you can really deal with things. And I don't know represents an open mind. Okay. Yes, Mark?
Oh, okay.
Yes, go ahead, Chris. I'll let you continue.
Yeah, so,
and Mark.
and it's almost time for service. So hopefully this is a short question, but basically I was hoping you could just say a little bit more about how you were talking about how helping others comes naturally, and how that, my question is how that relates to the letting go or dropping off body and mind or whatever that was, that part of your talk, how those relate.
Sure. Okay. It's true. There was kind of a hole there. So dropping off body and mind for us is recognizing who we really are. And dropping off body and mind for others is both our perception, but also we recognize that others are the same as us. Because because when we really realize who we are, we're just truly who we are, but we also have a background, and that background is emptiness. But even that is not important. That's like dropping off emptiness is like dropping off that. But what happens is we find our own true nature. We think we know what our nature is, but actually we don't. And when we study the precepts tell us who we really are. But since we don't know it, they say, well, I recommend doing this because you'll really be doing something that you would be doing if you truly understood who you were. And one of those things is that it is the true nature of human beings to be compassionate. But even more than that, because compassion is an idea towards others, is that we naturally help each other all the time. And you see it all the time in our life, people who jump in to help others. When they don't think about it, just the moment comes and they jump in and they help others. That's our true nature. So our true nature for everybody is everybody helping everybody else. Not because they're enlightened, you gave up enlightenment. It's because that's who you really are. And we study to find out who we really are. And it isn't is, and that's a matter of isn't rather than becoming. Got a little long there, Chris. Sorry, but anyway, we're going to do the service now.